Hello everyone, my name is Maria Feeney. My background is in sociology and education and I work at the School of Law and Government in Dublin City University. As some of you may know, when I did my own research some years ago, I interviewed men from rural Ireland that were admitted to hospital for serious suicidal behaviour. I'm delighted to be able to support Embrace Farm's efforts as they participate in Ag Mental Health Week 2020. I welcome this important national initiative established by Peter and Paula Hines, dairy farmers from Cork, to raise awareness about mental health in the agriculture sector. I believe Ag Mental Health Week is strategically aligned to one of the key aspects of the World Health Organization's response to addressing mental illness, specifically by promoting mental well-being, with a view to being more open about our mental health and moving away from the stigma that has made people feel vulnerable and harmed as a result of their problems and feelings. Because I have a sociology background, I'd like to look at how this might be helpful for thinking and learning about mental health in the context of the agriculture sector. For those of you that may not be familiar with what sociology can do, I'd like to tell you what my former professor once said. Sociology helps us understand how we have come to be the way we are. So let's begin our short presentation of 8 slides for Ag Mental Health Week 2020. Firstly, health is a fundamental right and everything else benefits in life from good health. As described by Shine, an Irish charity supporting people and their families affected by mental health means more than just the absence of mental illness. It means having a general sense of well-being and an ability to cope with life's everyday challenges. Mental ill health then ranges from the worries we all experience as part of everyday life to serious long-term conditions. Each experience of mental ill health is unique, even among people with the same diagnosis. At least 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem at some point in their lives. According to the World Health Organization, mental health conditions have a substantial effect on all areas of life, such as school or work performance, relationships with family and friends, and ability to participate in the community. 2 of the most common mental health conditions, depression and anxiety, cost the global economy $1 trillion each year. Factors and conditions that affect our mental health, such as the conditions in which we were born, grow, live, work, and age, are what we call the social determinants of health, and we need to be mindful of these when thinking about all things related to mental health. We know that stigma and shame are still associated with mental ill health. Stigma can make the burden of illness even more difficult, and the World Health Organization acknowledges that it is a significant barrier to help seeking. Last year at the Embrace Farm conference in Portlaoise, which I'll discuss in more detail shortly, an interesting finding emerged from the survey data, demonstrating that 83% of people who attended believed greater levels of stigma surrounding mental health exist in rural areas compared to urban areas, and that's something that deserves attention. For a minute or two, I'd like to provide an overview of what we already know about some of the issues in the agriculture sector that relate to mental health and ill health, especially in the farming community. In 2019, Embrace Farm collaborated with Rural Support in Northern Ireland and with the Farm Safety Foundation, the Wellies in the UK, to undertake a series of farmers' resilience conferences. The theme of the conference, Resilient Farmers Conference, Building a Community of Support, aimed to engage with all stakeholders across the public and private sectors, government, industry, and indeed amongst the farming community itself. Farmers' resilience is an important factor, not just for farmer well-being, but also for the well-being of the sector and society more generally. In fact, farmers' resilience is everyone's business. Jude McCann from Rural Support learned from his research with farmers across the world that resilience isn't just about bouncing back from adversity. It's also about being able to bounce forward. Another key finding that emerged was the concept of farmers' resilience was a complex and multifaceted one. Farmers' resilience could not be considered a standalone issue given the personal, social, financial, and economic factors that underpin it. Farmers' ill health and vulnerability emerged as an important issue that related to their ability to be resilient. Solutions to this need to be meaningful and tailored to their needs, farmer-proofed, so to speak. Well and healthy farmers are active and productive ones, and the entire sector and society benefits from farmer well-being. However, the realities of contemporary farming have the potential to compromise farmers' health and well-being. Working alone and under pressure, managing heavy and complex machinery, general malaise, undetected health conditions, particularly cardiovascular and musculoskeletal issues, isolation, undiagnosed anxiety and distress, and the stigma associated with rural men's mental health are factors implicated in the poor health status of some farmers across all regions. Moreover, such factors are linked to their vulnerability and risk in terms of death by farm accidents and suicide. Farmers' vulnerability to the latter is a well-known international trend, and this point of discussion at the conferences served as a sobering reality of the fate of some farmers and the need to build resilience and communities of support, not only in and among the farming community themselves, but also in wider rural society. Only last month, stories from Irish farmers and food producers demonstrating their resilience during COVID-19 emerged in a new piece of research called Stories from the Pandemic, published by TASC, the think tank for action on social change. They engaged in a social listening project to understand the ways COVID-19 was having an impact, and they heard from farmers, fishers, and horticulturalists. Resilience was front and centre in the findings, and it determined whether or not the food producer could seize the opportunities that were there to mitigate against the harmful impacts the pandemic brought. Farmers expressed concern about the mental health impacts of the closure of marts, for farmers for whom the mart is not just the hub of business, but also a social outlet. They also worried about the isolating effects cocooning was having on older people in their communities. However, it is very interesting to learn about some farmers' adaptability and their resilience in the midst of a global pandemic. Cian, a beef farmer from Sligo, struck a positive note in his story, and I'll read this quote to you now. He said, "The impact of COVID-19 has been strangely positive because I kind of set myself up to be independent from the commodity market with direct sales and seeds and that kind of thing. There's been a surge in demand for high quality, high nutrition, organic produce. So yeah, I've never been busier. And thankfully the chains in my production line, beef mostly, are the local abattoir and the courier service were solid. So I was able to carry on as normal with the higher demand. So it's all good in that respect." Later in his interview, he mentioned another positive. He said, "It may seem trivial, but from my view of the social aspect, I think there was a newfound appreciation and value for farmers that emerged during the period when people realised that these people are on the front line. Yeah, there seems to be a little spike in positivity in that regard." However, Cian also noted the devastating effects COVID-19 was having on rural communities more generally in relation to business closures and tourism. Charlotte, a vegetable farmer in Dublin, described how she and her family were able to turn around their business overnight. She said, "When COVID-19 happened, markets all shut down. There's always a good few restaurants and cafes on our list. So when COVID happened, we literally just had to change overnight. We'd heard rumours about everything shutting down on the Friday, and by Sunday night, when my daughters had put us up online, so that people could do what was a very crude click and collect. We've got a company now who helped us get a proper website up and running and a proper click and collect, and they've got to pay online before they come, and we basically just changed our business overnight. We went from selling at 3 markets and 2 days in the farm shop to basically 5 days in the farm shop." While these testimonies demonstrate positive resilience stories, not every farmer will have had similar experiences. But what these stories do show is how having support and the ability to adapt are important for farmer resilience in the face of adversity. I'd now like to briefly note another sociological factor that's important for understanding mental health in rural areas and in the agriculture sector, and that is masculinities, theories about what it means to be a man in rural society. How men see and think about themselves is important when considering the issue of mental health, particularly as it relates to other tragedies affecting rural society, such as the problem of suicide. Traditionally, men were supposed to be strong, tough, and the provider. They were the ones that supported their families, and they were stoic. Men weren't supposed to cry. Even today, many men feel pressure to adhere to these socio-cultural codes of conduct. As I explained to delegates at the Portlaoise conference last year, in the past, society offered little socio-emotional space for men to disclose their problems. The boys don't cry cultural script has caused untold damage because it prohibited men from availing of a necessary platform on which to build emotional resilience. For generations, men were denied the opportunity to openly identify with their emotions and their distress through adherence to the masculine code, thus limiting their help-seeking options. Some Irishmen excelled at public showmanship out of necessity, publicly hiding and concealing their distress by engaging in risky or harmful coping behaviours, such as drinking to excess and engaging in other forms of self-harm. During my own studies, one young man explained to me at interview that he never cried. At school and with his friends, he was worried that emotional expression in front of his peers would cast a question over his heterosexual status. He worried about being slagged for being gay, rather than risk breaching the masculine code of being emotionally stoic and strong. He cut himself repeatedly for years and simply said, "For me, my cuts are my tears." We also see male vulnerability in terms of mental health emerge for those who survive farm accidents, because the aftermath presents significant challenges, not only to their immediate and long-term recovery, but also to their wellbeing and resilience. Male vulnerability is also evident in terms of GP services, and we learned about this at the conferences last year from Dr. Rebecca Orr. Farmers' ill health and anxiety is underreported because they tend not to come through the door as often as they probably should. Consequently, there is an absence of health data about farmers that could assist with the designing meaningful and appropriate interventions and prevention initiatives that would help services reach out more effectively. Thankfully, however, we're seeing a definite and gradual shift of these socio-cultural ways of being. It is initiatives like Ag Mental Health Week that are really important to help get a conversation going and keep it going. It's great to see other things like the men's shed movement gathering momentum too, and offering a comfortable and meaningful space for people to come together and know that it's okay to talk. And we can all take hope from the fact that the current and new up-and-coming generations of young farmers, both male and female ones, are aware of the importance of farmer wellbeing and mental health. So there is much to be positive about in terms of raising awareness about mental health and removing its associated pathological stigma. To conclude, the hollowing out of rural societies globally in terms of health and other services, such as the closure of banks and post offices, undermine the ability of communities to be resilient and sustain and support themselves, and the international literature points to that. And I too noted this issue during my own presentation at the conference in Portlaoise last year, and again this June, in the Embrace Farm supplement in the Farmers' Journal. I suggested that we need to ask ourselves, in the context of building resilience for promoting health and wellbeing, how can we build communities of support if the social fabric on which they are built is threadbare for some? I wish to take this important opportunity now to acknowledge what Embrace Farm have done and the valuable contribution they make to Irish rural society through their support of those affected by farm accidents. In a time of profound personal trauma and recognising that they were not alone in their pain and grief, Norma and Brian Rohan provided valuable support to those in need. Put simply, in order to help the farming community, they built community. The idea of building supportive and resilient communities is an important aspect of creating circumstances where people's well-being can be cultivated and then flourish. In fact, just this week, I attended an online seminar related to another aspect of healthcare, and the doctor actually noted that in some cases, community is the best medicine. Knowing that there is someone else out there like you who is experiencing something similar and who can provide some support, even if it is only through listening. When our former president, Mary McAleese, spoke to more than 700 international delegates at a suicide prevention conference back in 2007, she said something thought-provoking. She noted that when it comes to issues like suicide, each and every one of us can contribute a different piece of the puzzle. I would say the same applies to mental health. No one group can be responsible for everything to do with our mental health. It's very much a joint effort in society, whether it's doctors, psychologists, a community support group like Embrace Farm, a men's shed meeting, a Macra na Firma meeting, or some other form of engagement. When efforts are combined and information shared, we can make really powerful strides forward. So I commend everyone who's taking part and making a contribution to raise awareness about mental health in agriculture during Ag Mental Health Week. Please help spread the word using the hashtag Ag Mental Health Week. One last thing to leave you with before I go. As I was working on this presentation, I was reminded of the words of one of the men that I interviewed in hospital after his suicidal behaviour. He was also suffering with depression. His own words for dealing with his depression were simple yet profound. He said, "When the good times are good, let's have them. And when the good times are bad, let's handle them." He used the words, "let's handle them." For this man, dealing with his depression wasn't something he was doing alone. Rather, it was a collective effort between him and his family. And I believe that spirit of collective effort to raise awareness about mental health and willingness to help those in need is what we are doing during Ag Mental Health Week, and it is essential as we move forward to be a more inclusive and compassionate society. For those of you that might be interested in reading some of the material I have referred to here in this presentation, I have prepared a list of resources that can be found on the Embrace Farm website. Further support relating to mental health issues may be accessed from the sites noted on this final slide. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this presentation insightful. Take care, keep well, and stay safe. Thank you.